L.A.G, or Latent Automaton Gangrene, is a short story written and performed by David Lawson. We hope you enjoy L.A.G, Part 4. Running Brook carefully weighed the inhaler in his hand. The overwhelming stress had built on him to the point he thought he might break. Still, he could not bring himself to light up the small cylinder and relieve his stress. It was a single-use only device, and this was the last one. The emotional strain was so great, Running Brook thought his wooden skin might crack from the pressure. He rubbed his face absent-mindedly, and his hand brushed against the mess of vines and leaves that had grown from his hair to his beard. "I really must shave," he said to himself without moving. He continued to look down at what he knew was the last connection he had to her. She came from a planet covered by thick smoke that her people had to breathe in every so often to stay healthy. The inhaler in his hand had been one of the ways she had done so off-planet. Running Brook had always found the aroma of the inhaler calming. With her gone and the satellite in crisis, he needed comfort in ways he couldn't describe. More than anything else within his power, Running Brook wanted to pop open the end of the cylinder and breathe in the smell of her. Instead, he carefully placed the cylinder on his desk, and he stood to pour himself some hot water. Running Brook walked over to the corner of his office where he kept his teapot suspended over a foreign stone that constantly radiated low-level heat in a given direction. It had been a gift from Jenna's husband, so that Running Brook would always have warm water for tea without running up his energy bill. He opened up the top of the teapot and reached up to his hair, pulling out a number of leaves loosely attached to the vines growing from his scalp. Running Brook crushed them in his hand before mixing them into the warm water of the teapot. Just as he set the lid back on the teapot, a ring chimed from his desk comm. "Councilman Gilroy would like to see you," the message read from his screen. "Maker, please let him come with good news. I am unsure how much more of the bad I can stand." With a resigned sigh, Running Brook pushed the button to open up his office up to Gilroy. Of course, as a member of the Satellite Council, Gilroy could access Running Brook's office without a request. But Gilroy had never flaunted his authority, instead opting to show those beneath him an incredible amount of discretion and respect. Brook had always admired that about the man. "Best to focus on the positives, I suppose," Running Brook mentally chastised himself. "You wouldn't want the poor man to think you disliked him just because he's had to give you some hard facts to swallow as of late." The door slid open, and Gilroy entered quietly, as Running Brook poured himself some tea. "What would you say to some tea, Councilman?" Running Brook offered with as much pleasantry as he'd ever possessed. "Did you make it with your hair leaves again?" Gilroy asked with his trademark apathy. "As it so happens, I did." Running Brook looked back at the small man with a smile. "No, he's not small. You are simply tall," he reminded himself. At just under 8 foot, most people he met on the satellite seemed small in stature to him. "Would you like some tea made from leaves a little less close to home?" Running Brook asked, shooting a smile over his shoulder. "Actually, your tea is the only kind I'm willing to drink." He held out a hand expectantly. Running Brook handed the fruit-flavored tea to Gilroy and poured himself a cup as well. "It's a relief to hear that your niece was not seriously injured. I didn't know your people could regrow damaged limbs." Gilroy started with some small talk. "It takes a considerable amount of time, but yes. Thankfully, her hand was only damaged and not fully destroyed, so she ought to heal in a few months' time. I'm more worried about the boy she was with than anything. It took hours to get him out of the lake," he recalled. "That aside, I can only assume you're not here for a social visit," Running Brook said as he sat back down at his desk. Gilroy took a slow sip of the tea and actually gave the smallest of half-smiles. "I knew I gave you a Vanguard team for a reason." Brook stifled his laughter to a small chuckle and took a sip of his own tea. The flavor was always slightly different based around the time of year and some other factors he hadn't been able to pin down, though he assumed they were connected to diet and activity. "Please tell me you have some good news, sir," Running Brook remembered that in Gilroy's younger days, he'd always objected to being called Sir. But as he had aged, the councilman eventually gave up the objection. Gilroy secretly suspected this was out of laziness more than anything, but he kept these thoughts to himself. Believe it or not, I actually do. Gilroy cleared his throat as he set down his tea. Of course, I also have some bad news, but at this point, a mixed bag is better than the endless stream of crap we've been getting lately. The suspense is killing me, sir, Running Brook said without dropping his smile. Gilroy raised his eyebrows and frowned. For a moment, Running Brook thought he might have offended the man, but his fears were soon put at ease. I never thought I'd end up rambling, but I suppose age changes us all. Gilroy again cleared his throat. Your plan with Killstreak worked. M is under observation, but all signs of lag have been cleared from him. He's been acting normally for about 7 hours straight now. Running Brook let out a strained breath he didn't know he had even been holding in. Thank the Maker. Gilroy, this is most excellent news. We have a cure. Gilroy offered a minuscule smirk, but it faded quickly, replaced again by his usual blankness tinged with concern. Running Brook's own excitement dimmed as Gilroy's expression faded. You might as well tell me now, sir. What exactly is the bad news? Gilroy scratched his head absently. Currently, only an AI with the complexity of our Core 4 can clear up the effects, and seeing the situation we're in, we can really only afford to have one doing it. Heck, honestly, we can't even afford to have Killstreak absent, but we'll make do somehow. Gilroy looked back up to Running Brook with a grimace. M is working with some computer scientists to see if his unique design can be used to mass-produce some sort of a cure, but in the meantime, Killstreak is going to have to clear this up one person at a time. He ran his hand through his orange-gray hair, ruffling his antennae in the process. And 3 people have already died today just due to a lag-related incident. This is going to be a long, slow process. Running Brook interlocked his fingers, giving Gilroy a discerning look. But we now have a cure. No matter how you look at it, this is an improvement. Brook set his hands down on his desk. Unless, of course, there is more. There's more, Gilroy confirmed with the click of his tongue. With agonizing unwillingness, Gilroy pulled out a small comm and pushed a few buttons before setting it on the table. It whirred to life and began to play blank static. One of our probes managed to catch this transmission through an unstable rift, Gilroy said solemnly. Before he could ask more, the static began to clear. It was her. She was ragged and weary, but still stunningly beautiful to Running Brook's eyes. Her breathing mask was gone, revealing her feline muzzle. All 4 eyes looked at the camera with fear and regret. Her breathing was almost as ragged as her clothing, and Brook wondered with fear how long she had gone without breathing in the smoke she needed to survive.
If anyone,
she started between raspy breaths.
If anyone gets this message, you won't find us, so don't even try.
The camera went fuzzy again, but even as the static played across the screen, Brook thought he heard quiet weeping before the video went black. Running Brook didn't know when he had begun to cry, but he was acutely aware of the tears streaming silently down his face and splashing on the desk. We're sending one final expedition to try and see if we can reach through the gravitational rift, but it doesn't look good, Gilroy said softly, his voice cracking despite his emotionless demeanor. Running Brook took a moment to compose himself and wipe away his tears. Thank you for your efforts, Gilroy. I know this weighs on you heavier than it does me. That's your world missing. Your family. Gilroy gave a half-hearted frown, but said nothing. I suppose in the meantime, we must deal with what's in front of us. Perhaps those who are gone will find their own way home, Running Brook offered with a renewed smile. I wouldn't count on it, Gilroy said gruffly. Their people spent most of their existence infighting, subject to slavery and abuse. When they got the chance to go back, they couldn't help but take it. Brook eyed the inhaler again while speaking. The Maker has provided much greater miracles than this for us before. If your plan involves hoping for a miracle, then I suggest you get a better plan, Brooke, Gilroy said while standing up. Sometimes that's the best plan that we have. Running Brook also stood to shake the man's hand. Either way, I think you're right about dealing with what's in front of us. Things will only get worse if we don't even try, Gilroy said with a firm squeeze of his hand. Then he slowly walked to the door, looking old, weathered, defeated. Everything he had spent his life fighting for now was gone, with nothing but further hardship on the horizon. Running Brook had spent over 5 years working with the vanguards. Gilroy had spent his entire life trying to save the people who had abandoned him now. Gilroy reached to open the door when Running Brook thought to ask, "Why did you get involved in the war? What were you hoping to accomplish for them, sir?" The old councilman stood in place for a moment. Running Brook could only assume contemplating. "I wanted to save him. He was thrown onto that beach with no memory, getting involved in things he had no understanding of. He was my only friend back then. Things just sorta spiraled out of control from there." Running Brook walked over to Gilroy, whose back trembled slightly from the silent sobbing of his own. Running Brook leaned down and softly wrapped his strong wooden arms around his mentor. "You did a good job. Im is alive and well thanks to you, and the whole universe owes you a debt of gratitude." Gilroy put his hand on Running Brook's arm and squeezed it once before slowly pulling away from the embrace. "Thank you, Vanguard Running Brook," he said without turning back. "I think I am going to go get some rest now." "I think that is a good idea, sir," Running Brook said with a small smile. "Running Brook?" "Yes, sir." Gilroy turned to face him with the faintest hint of a wry smile. "My name's Gilroy, not sir." Neither man could keep from chuckling at the old in-joke as Gilroy left the office. Running Brook walked back to his desk and pulled out a physical book. He didn't own many, but the Holy Scripture was something he wanted to feel in his hands rather than read on a screen. Something about the smell made it feel holier, at least. "If you break, I will remake you," he read out loud. "If your walls are torn down and your bones are broken, do not lose hope. There is nothing I cannot restore." Running Brook wondered how exactly the Maker would redeem this hopeless mess of a situation. Will he somehow restore our loved ones to us in a show of wondrous mercy? Or will he teach us how to go on without them? He sat at his desk studying for hours, hoping to discern what to do next. Unable to find the certainty he needed, Brook closed the book and lay back in his desk chair and prayed. He prayed until he fell asleep, dreaming of her smiling eyes and the uncertain future that awaited him.